we pick up part 2 of the introductory lecture by resuming our look at the 5 themes of geography. The 4th theme of geography is region, and a region is simply an area of land that is bound by similar characteristics. And I've listed here on the screen a number of different regions that you might be familiar with. A political region could be something like a state or a country. An economic region, you might have heard of Silicon Valley or Research Triangle or the Research Backbone in Maryland. A cultural region, you probably heard of the South, the Deep South, the Bible Belt. A natural region would be the Chesapeake Bay region. And a vernacular region is something that locals use to describe an area. You might hear something like Little Italy or Little Haiti, or another name given to an immigrant enclave or an area that is made up primarily of a certain group of people. So regions are just ways for us to limit the overall space. We can do so politically, and politically doesn't mean political parties, but rather political boundaries. Economically, what type of economic activities take place here? America had the Rust Belt for generations where we produced through heavy industry. Today, again, we have more Silicon Valley, we have more biotech, we have more research and innovation that guide our economic regions. A cultural region, think about maybe where you live. What are some names that your area may have? Again, we're familiar with some of our bigger cultural regions like the Bible Belt, like the South. But think about what contributes to these different regions. What are the characteristics that create them? And our final theme is place. And place is a very important theme because place has meaning. The difference between space and place are those attributes that give it meaning. Place could be something that is shared. It could also be something that's very individual. If someone asks you, what is your place? It might be being at home. It might be spending time in your room, reading, being online, with family. It could also be attending an event. Maybe you're a Baltimore Ravens fan or a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, and your place is being at that stadium on a packed Sunday with 70 or 80,000 other people. Or it could be what's called a third place, a place where you meet with friends or with family or with colleagues. Sometimes that could be a pub, sometimes that could be a park, sometimes that could be the gym. But we all have our place. It's the different meaning that's attached to a location. Now I want you to take a look at the picture on the screen here. This is a photo I took a few years ago in a small coastal town in Nicaragua. San Juan del Sur is located right on the Pacific Ocean. Now looking at this photo, you're going to start to detect a lot of different signs, a lot of different information. And one is that the natural characteristics. It looks pretty dry, it looks pretty warm, it looks mountainous. You could also see that this is a town, so people live here, they work here, they go to school here. And then I want you to look at the buildings on the left side of the road. Nicaragua is a Spanish-speaking country, but you'll notice that the one white building has a sign that says surf shop, information that's written in English. So that could give you another sense of place, another meaning for this small coastal town in Nicaragua, that it not only serves the local community, but when you have a surf shop, a business that's intended for meeting the demand of recreation, and also the language is in English, it begins to tell you that certain individuals see this location as something different. They see it as a destination for surfing. They see it as a destination for tourism. That sense of place begins to change for those people. Whereas the individuals on the screen, the two schoolboys, are likely walking to or from school. So this is their hometown. This is where they live. This is where they go to school. Their sense of place is different. So you could drive by my house and you could see a absolute location, an address means nothing to you. But to me, that's my home. And similarly, if I go past your home, right, I might not have a connection with that place, but you have a connection with that place. So place is just the meaning of a location. That meaning could be personal. It could also be shared. And our final topic that we're going to cover in this introductory lecture are maps. And then we'll look at the mapping process. A map is simply a two-dimensional graphic representation of the Earth, or part of the Earth. Nothing too complex about that definition. You are all familiar with maps, although today most of you probably use maps that are digital maps that reflect the advancements in GIS technology. This map is over 8,000 years old. We're not quite certain if it's a map, but it could potentially be the oldest known map. What the image is believed to portray are a number of houses in a town with a mountain in the background. We're not certain what this author is trying to present, but based on where it was found, we could presume that this was tied to an early civilization. When we look at the map making process, it's important to understand that a person is in charge of making maps. So this idea that all maps lie flat and all flat maps lie carries with it a pretty important message. One, that maps are two-dimensional. They're flat. They represent part of the Earth. And what all flat maps lie suggests is that whoever is creating the map is supporting an agenda. Now, that agenda doesn't necessarily mean to deceive somebody. That agenda doesn't necessarily carry with it negative connotations. But the cartographer is influencing our perceptions of space. We can't make a map the size of the Earth because then it would hold no practical purpose. So there is no perfect reality with map making. And as we're going to look here, cartographers make 5 decisions when creating maps. So they're trying to portray part of the world. They're trying to portray a message. They are either consciously or subconsciously influencing our perceptions. So when we look at the map making process, yes, all maps lie flat. They're two-dimensional. And all flat maps lie because some information is omitted, some information is emphasized, and that is at the discretion of the person making the map, the cartographer. This map is what is believed to be the first world map by a Greek cartographer and geographer. And this is in 550 BC. You can see Anaximander saw what he knew of the Earth and tried to portray it. A simplification of his map shows that he knew of Europe, Asia, and what he referred to as Libya, North Africa at the time. And you can see his simplified version is still a perception of the Earth, the world around him. Ptolemy came about 700 years later, and he created a very powerful map, one that included lines of latitude, one that understood the curvature of the Earth, that the Earth is in fact a sphere, it's not flat. So Ptolemy's information, Ptolemy's map began to open up greater interest in exploring the world. As we move into the Middle Ages, Arab geographers were the ones that picked up the map making process, and this map was created in the 12th century by Al-Idrisi, and Al-Idrisi created this for King Roger of Sicily, and this was profound at the time. This showed parts of the Earth that were unknown to most scholars, most people living in Western Europe, most people writing about the Earth at the time. But you could see that this version of the Earth is very fanciful. Early cartography was as much artwork as it was actual science and math and accuracy. This map from 1507, the Waldseemüller map, was the first that used the term America. So think about timing here. The late 1400s, we began to see European explorers venture west through the Atlantic Ocean into unknown lands. And in the early 1500s, we started to plot these lands. And the Waldseemüller map was the first to actually use that term America, recognizing that Amerigo Vespucci explored much of what is today North and South America. So cartographers use a lot of discretion when making maps. I always show this map in my classes and I say, is this map wrong? This map doesn't look like most maps that you probably view. But this map was made by an Australian cartographer. And as you can see, Australia is in the center of the map. Generally, the maps that we see has the Atlantic Ocean in the center, with North and South America on the left, and Western Europe and West Africa on the right. Projects some additional importance of the Atlantic Ocean. Well, this cartographer from Australia felt like, Australia is always down on the bottom corner of the map. It's seen as less important. So what he wanted to do was create a world map that is accurate, but also focusing on Australia in the middle. And you can see the gradation where the land at the bottom of the map is darker, and Australia and those areas in the southern hemisphere are brought to light. So this map is not wrong. This map is a world map based on the perception, the worldview of the cartographer living in that area. So when a cartographer, again, creates a map, they're using 5 different methods. They're using 5 different criteria to put the map together. One is projection. And when we have a round Earth, we can't lie it flat. We can't simply cut it. If you cut a lime, if you cut a basketball, a soccer ball, you can't lay them flat into a perfect rectangle. So when we use map projection, we're flattening the Earth and we're getting some type of distortion. The map on your left is called the Gauss-Peter map, and that map shows true area. So you can see how Africa is very large, the largest continent. The map on the right is called a Mercator projection, which looks at true shape. So the shape of Antarctica is accurate, but the size is massive. And when you look at the USSR, or the former USSR, Russia, you see that the size of Russia is massive. The map on the right was a map that was very common in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. And you can see how a map like this one on the right that shows the former USSR as being this massive piece of land and very powerful, very threatening, could be used for political purposes. The map on the left shows the greater size of South America and Africa. Greater size often indicates greater importance, and this map was used less. Here you can see the true size of Africa, where we could fit in the United States, we could fit in China, we could fit in India. And often in our mapping processes, Africa is seen as much smaller. A map that was developed in the 1990s is called the Robinson projection, and this projection compromises both size and shape to give us a good representation of the Earth while not 100% accurate. But again, with mapping, you're never going to be 100% accurate. The second criteria is what's called simplification. And when we make maps, we need to omit some information. We need to exaggerate other information. And you can see these two maps, they omit a lot of information. The map on the right is the Baltimore light rail. And this light rail map needs to admit a lot of space in between stops, because for the rider on the light rail, that information isn't important. What's important is the progression of stops. So if you're getting on at Patapsco and you're heading north, you want to know how many stops you have until you get to Woodbury. The map in the center and the left is a wine trail map. Now this map isn't great if you're looking for directions to two absolute locations, but it helps you understand relative locations of different vineyards along the Mason-Dixon wine trail. So simplification, we're cutting out the noise, we're cutting out the excess, and focusing on what's really important, what the intended message is. Our third criteria is map scale, also known as the zoom. And map scale comes into play when we're focusing on different regions and different areas of different size. Small scale shows us an area that is large with limited detail. So on the maps on the bottom along the spectrum, you can see on the left that we're looking at most of United States and Canada, at least the eastern half of those countries. And when we look at a small scale map, we're looking at a large area with limited detail. So the circled area has New York. As we shift right and we go larger scale, our area, the size of our area decreases, but the detail improves. So you can see Cape Cod circled on the right, which barely appears on the map on the left. So as we go from small scale to large scale, we increase detail, but we limit area. And when we look at different scales, this is where mapping becomes important. If we're talking about the United States as a whole, we're going to show less detail but bigger area. If we're looking at a certain economic region, we're going to focus on the certain towns, the sites of production that make that place unique. And this ends part 2 of the introductory lecture.